So the very first thing we're going to do is prepare the kit. I use this plastic tub, but you can obviously just use your sink. I put all of the parts in there and turn hot water on, and I use Dawn dish soap. You can use other dish soap, but Dawn really works the best. There's a lot of mold release agents and things on these kits from the factory that can cause issues with painting later. So you really want to use a good quality dish soap to make sure that you are removing any possible mold release agents, dirt, or any other oils from handling at the factory. I basically just, you can see exactly what I'm doing. I put a little bit on my hands and put it on each part and just kind of rub them with my hands. You don't need to use a sponge or anything, but you do want to make sure that you are getting in any crevices between fingers, ears, lips, places that that mold release agent can really be stuck into. And after I've washed all the parts, I just kind of swish them around in the soapy water and leave them in there for about 10 minutes or so. And when I'm done soaking, I just dump the tub out, and I want to make sure that I rinse the parts really well. You don't want any residual soap on your parts at all. I do this basically in as hot of water as I can stand, and then I just kind of shake each part off. As each one is rinsed off, I just go ahead and set it on a flat fold cloth diaper. You can use kitchen towel, paper towels, whatever it is that you want to use, just as temporary storage for them and a little tiny bit of draining. After that, I transfer them to my drying rack. If you're using air dry paint, you can just go ahead and leave them here for about 24 hours or overnight until all of the water's evaporated off. Otherwise, I put them in my oven, and you just want to make sure no parts are touching, and I bake them at 265 for 9 minutes, which evaporates any excess water, which is especially important if you're using heat set paint. So in this tutorial series, I'm going to be using a Bountiful Baby sculpt. This is Reborn Phineas. And the style of this baby is going to be a basic beginner baby. I'm not going to do all of my high-end details because this is a beginner's tutorial. I'm just hoping to give you guys the knowledge and foundation so that you can move on to the high-end tutorials and learn how to create prototype quality babies, but we all have to start somewhere. So I start pretty much every single baby the exact same way, and that is with veins and undertones. The reason that I do these first is because they're supposed to be under the skin, so they will go on first so that you build your skin layers over them and they'll barely poke through and look more realistic. Even though this is like a budget baby or beginner baby, I still want it to look as realistic as possible for you guys. Most beginner babies do not have veins, but it's definitely a really important skill to have, especially as you move on to creating higher end babies. So I really want to teach you guys how to do veins well. So the first thing that I'm going to do here, and this is important for you to know, in this bottle, I have odorless mineral spirits. And in this little squirt bottle here, I have Exodus thinning oil. And these are the two main things that I paint with. So, Exodus thinning oil is a little bit thicker than water. Mineral spirits is more of a water consistency. You can see it's not thick, but it really helps with blending. So I have my new palette here. I'm going to put a few drops of Exodus thinning oil in there. And I'm also going to take one palette over here and just kind of fill it up with thinner. This is going to be my well for cleaning out my brushes as I'm mixing. So I do make a custom vein color. I have a video on this, how to mix my custom color. But I do want to show you guys how to mix a vein color. And this is my vein color for Caucasian skin tones. So it's definitely more of a lighter blue-green base. If you guys have seen like the Bountiful Baby pre-mixed veins, that is a really great color for a darker skin tone. So I'm just doing, if you can tell, little brush strokes. I'm not scooping any out. I'm not using a toothpick to take any out. You want to just add a small amount at a time until we get the translucency level that I'm happy with, and then I'll show you guys how to know that that's the correct level. So this is gonna be pretty good here for the blue. So I just want to wash this out really well, and I'm just going to go ahead and blot it off, wipe it off on my paper towel here. We go through a lot of paper towels. This is a primary yellow color. This is Phthalo Blue 06. You can really use any blue that you have. This is my favorite one for creating my vein color. So I'm just doing barely touching that. I don't know if you guys can see how little paint is on my brush. Yellow is just so strong. You really want to make sure that you're going very slow with it. All right, so I'm happy with this. This looks like my normal color. And I have here a 3/10 line round brush. This is a really great brush size for doing veins on this size baby. So the very first thing I want to do after I mix up my vein color here is I want to test it. I don't want to automatically put it here where it's going to be visible. So I want to go ahead and try it on the back of the head here. And that looks very good to me. I want to get a cosmetic wedge, and I just want to kind of gently pounce it. And actually, you know what? Okay, this looks good to me, but I'm realizing you guys can't see it. So I'm actually going to mix this a little bit darker than I normally would, just so you're able to clearly see what I'm doing. If you're not sure if your vein mix is dark enough, a really good rule of thumb is if you can see them slightly in person, take a photo with your cell phone. If you can see them in the photo, they are too dark. You want to be able to just barely see them in person and not in photos. If you can see them in photos, you won't be able to cover them up with paint, and then it'll look like you drew them on with a marker. All right, so on the back of the head here, I want to show you how we're pouncing them out. You don't want to do a straight line. You always want to have kind of a little bit of a curve like this. And you want to take your cosmetic wedge. You don't want to wipe this color off. You could tell I just wiped that one off easily. What you want to do is you want to just really gently press it. When you get to the ends, you want to press it a little bit harder. You do not want to be able to see where a vein stops and starts. So you're really pressing this part to really kind of fade it out very light. You press a little bit less in the middle. You want to be able to see them. You just don't want them to look like a random mark in the center of the skin. You want just bits and pieces to poke through. I do veins in like smaller amounts like this, even though sure, this baby could have a vein that goes from here to here. You wouldn't see the whole thing at one time. So I want to break it up into realistic amounts, I guess. So these are the general spots that I would do veining. I go up from the corner of the eyes, and I want to pounce these ones pretty well. You don't want to pounce over and over and over. If you pounce once and it doesn't disappear, you just want to increase the pressure that you're using to pounce with. Then I'm going to go up, and you could tell it's curved around, it's not straight. This end I'm going to pounce harder to make it kind of disappear, and then a little bit less in the middle, and then again harder at the end. I don't think you guys can see this but it looks perfect in real life, except for this part is a little dark, so I'm just going to pounce that a little bit more. And again, when I'm talking about pouncing, I'm not talking about rubbing or, moving. Pouncing is literally just a press down and a pull up. And you can do these with a lot of different pressures depending on what you're wanting to do, but you never want to move it around at all. You just want to be actually pouncing. So the next vein that I would do is gonna be right here on the inside of the ear, kind of. This one I want to pounce fairly hard, but again harder at the ends. And then we'll do another one that comes up here and kind of goes off. And these, again, I'm pouncing very hard at the ends to really blend those ends, but I want it to be a little bit visible on this part, and that looks perfect. And I'm sorry, I'm like really trying to slow down here. I apologize if I'm going too fast. When you're learning, you should not be going as fast as me. I would say 99% of the issues people have from reborning is by not slowing down enough and really like focusing on what you're doing. So we just want to kind of do the same thing on the other side, a little bit of a triangle shape, and pouncing these harder at the ends. You can do some smaller ones. This is kind of like more advanced veining. But these are kind of the basic ones right there. Some people also do a vein down to the cheek there. I wouldn't recommend doing any that are going to be really visible like this until you really have veining down. Because those can look really bad if they're done too dark. As far as veins go here, I do kind of a little V here, and then another here. And I just want to give a good pounce, and then again at the ends, a harder pounce. I want to do a brachial artery on the inside of the arm here, which is a more prominent vein. And then I want to do one on the hand here, and you basically can just kind of do a little squiggle line like that, starting here and going up towards the finger. And this one you want to pounce again on the ends. And that will be pretty much it for a very basic beginner veining. As you get more comfortable with veining and you start doing more advanced reborning, you can definitely add a lot more veins. On my normal babies, I do a lot of veining. And I should add one thing that I forgot about talking about in the very beginning. So you guys can see I'm holding this baby with my hand and I'm painting. I'm painting with oil. I'm painting with heat set products that are all oil based. A little bit of oil from my hand is not worse than the oil that's in here. However, if you are painting with air dry paints, you probably want to wear gloves or just make sure that you're never touching the vinyl, that you're only touching the flange. I would recommend wearing gloves because it's really difficult to paint well and detailed like this all the time. So we're gonna go ahead, we'll just do one like that, just kind of diagonal up the hand. It doesn't matter how you want to do it. You just want this vein to be showing through in the very middle there. And I'm just going to get these out of the way until we go back for them. Okay. So on the legs here, I would do a vein here on the foot. And one on the inside of the thigh here. And that's going to be about it for basic veining. You could, of course, do more. But I really want you guys to focus on the quality and not the quantity. I would really recommend, if this is your first time veining, if you're not like a, prodigy or anything, if you're a normal person where reborning is really, really difficult, you're going to need a lot of practice. Don't expect that your first baby is going to look great. Most people's do not. But I would recommend really practicing veining. You don't have to bake it. You can practice veins as many times as you want. You can wipe them off. You can redo them. You can get test limbs and test parts. You can get like really ugly kits that are on clearance and use them as test babies. And I highly recommend that. The only way to get better is by continuing to do it and practice over and over. So this vein mix here is going to be our darkest mix of color ever. And I showed you the way that you test it by looking at it, taking a photo. Now we're going to do a different type of layer. We're going to do an undertones layer. So I'm going to get my Exodus thinning oil. I'm going to put a little bit in there. Undertone layers like veins are different than other types of layers. The way that you do them and the translucency of the paint is going to be different. So I'm just going to touch my brush here again. You can see I do not have like a glob of paint. I'm literally just pressing against my paint jar. This would be too light. I'm just going to show you if I put this on the head there, you wouldn't be able to see any color. That would be fine for a depth layer or a model, which we'll get into later. But for undertones, which will show through the skin eventually, just like veins, we want it to be a little bit of a darker mix. And I believe this looks perfect here. So I just want to show you guys what this looks like on my paper towel here. It's about that dark. But the best way for you guys to tell, and I'll be doing this a lot throughout the process, because this is definitely the hardest part, is trying to figure out transparencies. I should have maybe mixed some more. But this is about what it will look like in a see-through container. So to do this, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to use the same brush here that I just mixed my color up with, and I can just use them out of both of these containers now. Undertones go in some specific places. I'll put an undertones chart here. I do not use all of the undertones colors on every baby. It really depends on the specific sculpt and the vinyl color. If I have a sculpt that is yellow, for instance, that's very yellow, I don't want to add any yellow undertones because I already have all that yellow from the vinyl. So it's really going to depend on the specific kit. This is a Bountiful Baby kit. It is not yellow at all, so I will do yellow undertones on this. But let's go ahead. We're going to do the blue ones first. So blue undertones will go in the corner of the eyes. And since this is a newborn baby, I'm going to go ahead and do it over the bridge of the nose as well. This is what the paint will look like on here. You could tell it's pretty much exactly the same as it looks in the cup. So I just kind of smeared that on. I don't want to leave it like that at all. I am going to take a filbert brush and I'm just going to pounce it, is what it's called, just like we did with the sponge, except for now we're doing it with a brush and we're just tapping that color out to kind of blend it. I will do a little bit down in the corner of the eye here and in the crease of the eye, meaning the area between where it closes, like where the eyelid would be closed. And I just want to pounce those really well with my brush so that I don't have any excess paint. Creases can look very dirty. We're also going to spend a lot of time on creases in here. And so you want to make sure, this is what we call cleaning creases out during painting, which is not the same as if you have an issue and need to clean it out, but it's really just making sure there's no excess running paint or any buildup of paint that when you bake it or when it cures, it will end up looking very dirty. So another place here that we are going to do these undertones are going to be right on top of the eyebrow bones. The eyebrow bones I can see really clearly here, and then if you run your finger over it, you can feel the little hump of the eyebrow bone, and then the top of that, there's a little bit of an indent, and this will be the case on most sculpts. Some sculpts don't have that indent, but you'll just want to go right where your finger starts, going down from the brow bone. And you just want to kind of put some paint there. And then same thing, we will pounce that to blend it with our brush. And then you'll take a cosmetic wedge. One of the cheaper cosmetic wedges is fine. And you'll just want to pounce around the edges of that just to blend it in. You don't want any harsh lines in reborning. So I'll go ahead, we'll do the same thing on here. Just put it on, pounce it or blend it. And then just kind of gently pounce the edges to really blend that in. And sorry about that, I dropped my brush, which I do quite often when I'm painting. So the next area that we want our blue undertones are going to be on the temple area. These ones I can feel with my finger. But it would be, you know, exactly where your temple is, just kind of go up diagonal from the ear, and it's going to be this triangle area. I don't want to draw a triangle, but I just want to kind of pounce that sort of area in, and then I won't use a brush for that larger area. I'll just kind of pounce it with my cosmetic wedge. And this is going to mimic areas of thinner skin and natural shadowing. So the next area that we are going to do is around that crease on the nose and right down diagonally. And I'm going to go ahead, take my brush, just pounce those a little bit. And if I need to blend any areas, I will. And we'll just do the same thing on the other side here. And these areas of shading, worry about if you're going too dark. Don't worry about if you're going too light, because these are areas that we can touch up as we're painting. If we decide we want some more shading here or there, it's really easy to touch those up. The next area I'm going to do is the philtrum, or your angel's kiss, right underneath the nose there, that line. I'm just going to do a small line of shadow there. And then this crease right under the chin will get some shading as well. And right here on the sides of the chin. Other areas would be on top of the ear here, which would kind of mimic veining. And on the bottom of the ear, which would also mimic veining. And you can just kind of pounce the edges a little bit on those areas. Again, you just want to make sure there's no harsh paint lines. And these aren't undertones, but while I'm here and I have my blue, I also want to do a layer inside the nostrils and the creases in the ears. My painting style is a little bit different, and while this won't be utilizing like my full range, there are certain things that I always do the same. I do not do a single layer of a dark crease. I build them up very slowly so that they look as realistic as possible. Some people do have like a crease color that they use, or they'll use a dark brown, and they'll just do one layer of creases. You don't get much depth and realism doing creases like that with one layer. So it's just a really good habit to get into building them up slowly if you're going to want to go on to create high-end dolls. I will also do the creases here on the face. And I'm hoping you can see when I'm talking about doing creases, the lines that are sculpted in, that are indented in, I'm literally just taking a small amount of paint on my brush. I'm running it on those creases so that the paint goes inside the divot in the creases. And then I'm just pouncing it to make sure there's no excess. I'm using a very small amount of paint. I have excess thinning oil in here, so it's not too watery. Here, this one will be a better one that you guys can see. I want to use the right size brush for this. This one is a really great size brush for that. But you can see there's, even with my consistency being what it is, there's still a tiny bit of buildup. So that's when I want to take my brush and just pounce over that. That just soaks up any excess paint and helps keep it looking clean. You could see if I were to do those with this big old brush right here, I would be getting paint on the outside of the crease. I still can work like that. I can go ahead and clean it up with my brush, and then I would need to take my cosmetic wedge and clean it out also. So it's just some extra steps. Reborning is one of those things you always want to work very cleanly and carefully. You don't want paint slopped around. You want to be very intentional with any spot that you're putting paint on. And I'll also do these creases here behind the ears. And this first crease layer, you're not going to be able to see really afterward. Ideally, when you're painting a Reborn, and this one might be a little bit different because it's a budget baby, so we're going to build the skin tone up a bit differently than on my normal high-end babies. But ideally, you should not see any results in the first 10 layers or so. What happens is we do all of these semi-transparent layers and they all end up working together. So you might not see each one individually for the first 10 layers, and then all of a sudden there's enough of them working together where you see this huge improvement. Just instantly you're gonna look at your baby and go, whoa, this baby is really coming to life. Like you can actually see the progress. This is one of my little tiny Q-tips. That's a toothpick. One of my Q-tips comes in handy. There is something stuck in this little crease here, and I can just get that out with that small microblading Q-tip. I am gonna do a little bit of blue right on the mouth here and bring that up onto the milk blister. And I'm gonna go ahead and again pounce that very, very well. You don't want dirty looking lips. If you have trouble getting in there, you can kind of stretch the face like that so that you can get your brush in there well. All right, so here is Phineas with some undertones on her face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of the blue undertones, and then we'll come back and do some other colors. So we're going to go ahead and do some undertones here on the arm. So most of these, again, these blue undertones were mimicking thin skin or veining. We're going to do right in the center of the palm here, and you want to just kind of do like a little triangle. Her fingers are hiding the top of the triangle, So we're just doing the bottoms and a little bit to the sides. And I just want to pounce that again really well. I want to clean those areas out. If you get some, like I just did, accidentally on the finger, it's fine. Just go ahead and wipe it off with your cosmetic wedge. My brush is kind of wet right now, so I can do right here, this crease where there would be some more veining coming in there. I can do this area on the inner arm. Right here where at the very base of the fingers where they meet, there would be veining there that would leave a little bit of a shadow here. And there's also a lot of veining here in the top of the wrist, so we can just do some shading there as well. And then I want to come in and I want to do my first crease layer on this baby as well. I mean, on these parts as well. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is the hands. Bountiful baby kits have so many creases. We are not going to crease every single crease. We're going to crease important creases, and very small creases will end up getting paint in them as we continue painting. So I'm going to do this crease here where the fingers are meeting. We can take it out just a little bit on some of these creases, but we don't need to do all of them. And then I'm just going to bring that around and then to these deeper creases only. I'm not bothering with all these little teeny tiny ones right now, just the deeper ones. And I got a little bit of extra paint in there, so when I need more paint on my brush here, I'm just gonna grab some from right there. And we're gonna go all the way around all of these fingers here and into just these more pronounced larger creases right here. So these I'm going to pounce very well. And then I also want to take my cosmetic wedge because I accidentally got some on the fingers here. So I don't want to get them into these creases, but I just kind of want to touch the areas that shouldn't be blue without removing it from the creases themselves. Bountiful baby kits are definitely the hardest kits that there are to paint. They're often recommended to beginners because they're so affordable. Nobody's first baby is ever like good enough to sell or anything. So it's really great to be able to buy like 3 or 4 kits for the price of one kit, one like limited edition artist sculpted kit. That way, if you don't want to strip your kits, which is the process of removing all of the paint and starting over, you can get a lot of practice, you get a lot of bang for your buck. But they do have a ton of creases, and not only do they have a ton of creases, the vinyl color is much lighter than anywhere else, so they take a lot more time to build up color. And that can actually be really beneficial when you're learning because they take so long that you can really get your technique down before you can visibly see anything on the baby, ideally. So this hand is open, so we can do our little triangle shape. And so I just want to kind of blot the paint in there into a little triangle. I just want this area right there. And I'll just go ahead and pounce that as well, just clean it out a little bit. And I want to do my little creases here on where the fingers are meeting. And again, just these deeper creases. And you can do these little ones on the knuckle. And again, where these fingers are meeting and the larger creases coming out. So again, here I have blue paint all over the finger there from Pouncing. So I just want to go ahead and touch that area with my cosmetic wedge just to get that excess out. And same thing with any other creases that you do. So I'm doing these creases around the wrist. And we'll do these ones. And I'm also gonna do those undertones at the base right there where the fingers would meet, and I'm just gonna pounce those a little bit with my brush. On the inside of the arm here, and also this whole crease. These are some smaller ones, but I will do these little ones on the hand, on the arm. And then, of course, these deeper ones on the arm. And I just want to get some excess that is not on the crease, and that'll be it for this one. And I'm hoping that I have enough here. I should have enough, hopefully, for the legs. So we can go ahead and for blue undertones here, the areas are going to be underneath the ankles, and that'll be on both sides. Where the toes meet at the base, just like the fingers. Right here on the front of the ankle. And I do have charts showing all this. If you go into my private Facebook group for students, I have all that supplemental material in there. If you do not have the link to join and you are a paying student, let me know and I'll get you the link for that. So now those are the only areas for undertones here, here, behind here, and then I was absent-mindedly doing a couple creases. Sorry about that. One more area though for undertones are on the foot here. You want to be almost in the center but offset to the side. This is an area that would have a lot of little veins and much thinner skin. So you really just want to shade that area to mimic it. And then let's go ahead. We're going to do the creases here between the toes. And when you do these creases, you want to make sure that you bring them all the way up on the top and around. You don't want that top area to be blank. And we'll just do a couple of these wider creases, but I don't want to do 90% of the ones on the feet right now. And I'll just take my cosmetic wedge and kind of blot the top there. And I want to do the creases here around the ankle. You want to make sure, I'm hoping you guys are able to see, you want to make sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush. Because I'm using Exodus thinning oil, I can kind of load it up and I'm not going to have any running because it's slightly thicker. But if you're using this, for instance, and had it on your brush and put it on, it would run down. So if you are using odorless mineral spirits, you can just dab your brush off on your paper towel very gently before you use it, just to get any excess off. It'll really make cleaning creases up a lot easier. All right, so that is good for undertones and creases on that leg. So this leg, same exact thing. We're gonna do middle of the foot and out. We're gonna do under the ankle bone on both sides. The base of the toes. You don't want to bring it down too low. This one I came down a little bit lower because they're open. On the closed ones, you really just want barely a little amount there. We want to do some shading on the back of the leg here, right behind there, where there would be some extra veins and such. And then we'll jump right into creases. So again, we'll do between the toes and coming all the way up. And just a couple of these deeper creases there. And we'll go ahead and pounce those. You want to do these really well. Fingers and toes can tend to be problem areas. The creases on the limbs are usually a lot easier. These ones can tend to get very dirty looking very quickly. So you really just want to make sure that you're doing a very thorough job. And this should be taking you a long time to do like a good thorough job. I'm not expecting you necessarily to paint along at the same pace as me. Definitely use the pause button if you need to. I'm trying very hard to really slow down. But it's difficult, I won't lie. I'm so used to painting at a normal, my normal speed and pace. So it's really hard to kind of slow down and think about what it was like when I didn't know how to paint yet and how fast I would have painted back then. I mean, I know it was much slower than it is now. Now it takes me about 4 weeks to complete a baby. Some babies are 6 weeks. When I first started, it took me like months, and I feel like that's great. All right. So that one is done as well. So now we're going to move on to our next color of undertones. And that is going to be green. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this blue that I have. I'll add a little bit of yellow here. just to get kind of like a light lime green color. I don't want to mix up a whole thing of it because I need very, very little. Green undertones are really amazing for adding depth, as long as you know where to do them and do them in the right place. So I personally do green undertones right here on the outer corners of the mouth. And every time you use your blending brush for another color, you can use a new blending brush every time, but you just want to make sure that you wipe it off really well on your paper towel. If I was using like red and then green, because red and green make brown, I would probably not use this same brush, but I went from blue to green, so that's all right. Then we're going to do the outside corners of the eye here. And we're just going to do right on this line of the ear that sticks up. And we want our green to be very light. It's just kind of like a little highlight. And that is it with the green. So next, and I'm just going to take a little bit of paper towel here. I just want to clean this well out. But I want to put yellow next to my green, which isn't that important, but when you're pulling color up and stuff, it can often go into the well next to it. So if it does, I'd rather it went into a green versus something else it doesn't really go with. So we're just gonna do a little bit of thinning oil in there. I'm gonna make sure my brush is rinsed well. And again, I'm just touching my brush to it. And that is some bright yellow here. Yellow is a color you need to be so careful with. Usually if you have too much yellow pigment, it won't necessarily turn everything yellow. You'll get these like bright, crazy yellow blotches kind of look. So I just want to show you what this would look like on paper towel here. So this is too much pigment. So I'm going to add a few more, 4 more drops-ish, and mix this up here. That looks a little bit better, but the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the top of the head. I'm going to pounce it off, and okay, it's safe. It's okay. I want you guys to get in the habit of always testing your colors on the back of the heads. I should say, unless you are planning on doing bald babies. If that's the case, get some test parts and test it on your test parts. So the first spot for yellow undertones is right on the eyebrow bone. Just right where your brows are gonna be. And I'm just gonna pounce those. The eyebrow bone is raised. You could see it's, where eyebrows would naturally be growing. Just want to use this smaller brush here. On the philtrum, there's the indent, and then there's the 2 sides that stick up slightly. We just want a little bit on those sides that stick up, just a super, super light layer. The next area is going to be a larger area. It is going to be, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My light just randomly turned off. Okay. So it's going to be all over the nose. Well, around the tip of the nose, not up here, but kind of from that shaded line down on the fat area of the cheeks up here. And I want to use a larger brush to blend this, about this size, from the like cosmetic brush, about as big as your pinky finger, your pointer finger. And you just want to pounce this over and blend it in. And then also another fatty area right here, just on the top front of the chin there. And that is it for yellow undertones. So now we have our very first layer of veining done, our very first layer of undertones done. Technically, we could bake this. I don't like wasting a bake. So we're going to do one layer and then we're going to bake. What we're going to be doing is what I call a depth layer. These are layers that look similar to a modeling pattern. I'll show you the difference on my sponges here. So this would be a modeling pattern sponge. It has large holes. They don't have to be like exact holes. They could be shaped like this, but they are a larger pattern. A depth pattern would be these, this, the exact pattern doesn't matter. It's the size. It is very, very small little patterns. The purpose of these is to create depth. You might hear, I do know someone else calls these texture layers. I do not call them texture layers because I do actual texture layers when I do skin texture. So I just don't want it to be confusing for anybody. So I call them depth layers. You'll hear it in all of my videos when I'm talking about depth layers. That's what these are. So the very first depth layer that we are going to do is going to be an ultramarine blue. I'm just going to wipe this green here out of my palette because we're not going to use it again anytime soon. For a depth layer, we can go ahead. We'll use regular odorless mineral spirits, and I'm just going to put some in there. I'm going to take a mixing brush. I'm just going to touch my brush to my paint. And I'm going to do it again very slowly always. It's a lot easier to add more than it is to take away. Sometimes you'll have to use a pipette, drain your well of some color to be able to water it down. So that is about right, but I want it a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to add some more thinner. I'm trying to make like enough so I can show you guys in a cup. So this is perfect right here. And this is what it should look like in a clear cup. When people, or I should say, I talk about this a lot, other people do, they're constantly saying, your paint needs to be thinner. Like we're always telling beginners this, because this is the one thing that 99.9% of beginners have in common. They might be used to painting other things, but Reborn painting is not like any other painting in the world. Everything is very different. Even using the same products, the way that you use them is so different. So people, it's really hard to grasp. I think I've said this phrase a lot of times, thin means thinner. And so when we're saying thin, We are usually talking about translucency. We're not talking about consistency as far as thick and thin. You can never go wrong with your layers being too thin. Worst case scenario, you have to do too many of them. But you can go wrong very, very quickly from having your paint too thick, too concentrated, and getting a result that you're really not happy with. And I find that that can be discouraging. So I really want to focus on this paint consistency while we are doing this, and translucency levels, and try to give you guys a really good foundation for that, because it'll help in, the quality of your babies will be so much better. Everyone has probably seen a baby that looks thickly painted or that looks fake. You could just tell it's painted. The vinyl doesn't look stained. And most of the time that is from having paint that is not transparent enough. So I'm going to take this blue. This is one of my depth layer sponges. This is a sponge that I use blue on very often. It's a really good idea if you get some of these sets to get a couple of them. This set here, I generally use for like reds and purples, anywhere in that red and purple family. And then I also have this smaller set that is just a depth set. I use this for all of my blues. And I don't use green very often, but I do have two sponges here that are specifically earmarked for green. What can happen is, say that you have this that you've been using red on, and you were to try to do a green layer over here. Because pigment settles into your sponges, and we don't really clean our sponges out. When you get sponges wet, they blow up and expand, and they will change the pattern shape forever. So what we do when we're done with sponges is we blot them off really hard, and the thinner kind of evaporates, and there'll always be a little bit of pigment left in it. You can tell. About 10 years ago, this was white. The outside is like bright magenta. This is a horrendous color. So it'll settle in there. When you go to model it on, you'll actually be modeling brown on. You will not be modeling on the color that you just painted on here. So you just want to make sure that your sponges, you're using specific sponges in that same color family. Okay, so this is going to be our very first layer. So there is, you don't want to saturate your sponge. I just want to show you guys this again. I have pigment on my brush here. I just kind of wipe it off a little bit, just to let the excess run in. And I'm just painting this super thin layer. I can't wring anything out. It's just a very thin layer. And then I'm just touching it to the vinyl and picking it up. I'm not like, if I press down really hard, I'm going to get this perfect shape, and I'm going to lose a lot of that pattern. You're basically using this just like a stamp. So I want to go around. I want to get very close to the ear here. I actually want to do one on top of the ear. I want to do the entire face with this. I'm not doing the entire head. The reason for that is that I'm rooting the head. I'm not painting the head. It is a waste of paint, first of all, to do that for me. But more important is that you cannot varnish where you're going to be rooting. A lot of varnishes crack with rooting, but more importantly, well, maybe not more importantly, but also if you do a varnish layer and then you poke a rooting needle into it, you are breaking that protective barrier, allowing moisture to get underneath the varnish into your paint layer over time as people spray it with mohair conditioner and things like that, and that can cause peeling and damage to your paint over time. So I pretty much, I go up to about here, which my hairline's going to be down here, but I want to go up a little bit higher. My hairline is going to be here, but I want to do this area behind the ears. I'm just leaving this bulk of the head blank. So the head is done. We'll repeat the same exact process. Just get your brush wet and do a very light layer over here, just enough to get that pigment on. And we will go ahead and just lightly stamp the whole baby. Sometimes if you press too hard or if you get an odd shaped sponge, like this sponge does it a little bit. If I do this, you can see this circle kind of outline. So you want to just go over the edges of that to break it up so that you don't have a perfect shape outline of whatever it is you're modeling with. I always do the fingers and the hands. And that is it for this one. You do want to make sure, and these slanted ones are really easy, but when you're doing these creases, you want to make sure that you're getting in on both sides of the crease so that you don't have a situation where you have this blank space on top of the crease, since this can't actually go into the crease if you set it on top. And every time you get more paint from your palette, you just want to give it a little stir. And again, these are our first layers. They should look very transparent. You should not be able to see really any pigment when you're putting this on. Like I said before, they will work together with other layers that you will be able to see later, but reborning is far from an instant gratification job. So so just be patient, and I hate when people say this, but trust the process. If this is your very first baby, you will probably get very frustrated and kind of discouraged, but I promise you, after a certain point, you'll see all those layers and you'll go, oh my gosh, it is so good that I didn't make that darker, because this would now be way too dark. And so same exact thing on the legs. The legs are larger surface area. If you are using a smaller sponge, if like this one holds pigment pretty good all the way to the end. But if you're using a smaller sponge and you get partially done and you look down and there's nothing wet when you're stamping your sponge anymore, like everything is gone, you can go ahead and just add some more paint to your sponge just like you did the very first time. And I'm going to try to do a good mix of different skin layer types in here. Just so you guys get, you know, all of the info to make my future videos easier for you to follow. But I also want to give you a decent beginner looking baby. Or I should say, a decent looking beginner baby. And in other future layers, I kind of worry about getting this on the nails. This very first layer is so light that you really do not need to worry about it. As long as it is light like this, where you can barely see a touch of pigment when you're pouncing this on, you will be fine. And I missed one little spot right there. All right, perfect. Okay, so at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bake this kit and these layers. I'm gonna bake at 265 degrees Fahrenheit for 9 minutes. I don't know what paint you guys are using. Some of them have different baking instructions. Some of them require longer bake times. So use the instructions on your paint, whatever paint you're using. If you're using air dry at this point, you would just want to let this dry to the touch. And then you can pick up with your next layers. You do for air dry want them all to dry, but you can only do about 8 layers in a day. And then you have to let it cure for 24 hours. So, you know, just pay attention to that. But for all of the heat set users at this point, we are just baking normal bake instructions. And this is how I'm baking in my oven. I do have videos on setting up an oven. You want to make sure nothing is ever touching the metal extender ring or the glass bowl here. Vinyl, if it touches these, it's very hot. They will melt. You don't want parts touching each other. They will melt and stick together and can cause paint damage. So you want to make sure everything is leaning against whatever you have lining your oven and that no parts are touching. And then just go ahead. I bake for 9 minutes. All right, guys, so we're gonna do one more layer in this video. I just want to clean my brush out here. And I'm gonna use a different palette. The color that I'm using is Eyelid Purple. Sorry, let me adjust that for you guys. Okay, the color I'm using is Eyelid Purple. This is a Bountiful Baby Premix Genesis color. Most of the paint lines you'll find if you're using a Reborn specific one do have an Eyelid Purple. Or this, if you want to mix this yourself, it is just blue and red mixed together. So I'm just going to put a little bit of my oil in my palette here. And again, whoops, my paint is super old and dry, but you just want to touch it to there. If you have more watery paint, you want to be really careful and like really just touch the sides so that you're not getting too much. This one we are going to do a little bit darker. I am going to use this for, you guessed it, eyelids, but I'm also going to use it for some creases. And I'm going to mix some more of this, so don't pay attention to how dark this is this second. So because we're using it first for creases, I am going to use my thinning oil just because it does make for much smoother creases that that don't look dirty at all. It just blends much better in creases. So I have that there. I have my little crease brush here that I want to make sure I rinse that out, that's clean. And I have my little blending brush here. Again, I just want to make sure there's no leftover color in that. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use it darker like this, and let me use this brush so you guys can see. It is like this on a paper towel. So I want to go ahead, I don't just want to smear it on like eyeshadow, but I want to do it on the creases here between the eyes. And I'm doing it, you know, a little bit of excess on there to pounce. And actually, we're going to go a little bit darker than that. It looked good in my palette, but such is the nature of painting. try this really quick before I put this away. Okay, that is better. So I'm just gonna pounce this off that I just did and we'll redo it. So again, same thing. I'm just kind of wiping it on the edge of my palette so I don't have a ton, but I want to do it in the creases here. And just a little kind of pat on the eye. And while I'm cleaning my creases up, I'm just kind of blending it up a little bit. And then you can take your cosmetic wedge and just kind of get the excess out. But you mostly want it covering like from here down. So we'll go ahead, we'll do these creases as well. And again, I'm cleaning that crease out and blending it towards the top. And we'll just pounce that area. I'll do a little bit more down here. I don't want to emphasize these ones too much because I don't want poor little Phineas here to look like he has crazy bags under his eyes. I'm also going to do a little bit more of this in the inner eye corners and on the bridge up here. This is going to kind of tater-tot, stop, work together with that blue that we did and just help with a little bit more shadow shading. We're going to do the crease on the outside of the nose here. Blend that in, and then I'm going to use my cosmetic wedge and wipe the excess off. We'll do a layer inside the nostrils. We want to build these up with a natural shadow so that it gives the illusion of them being open. A very long time ago, people used to actually drill into the nose. I know there are still some like very outdated tutorial series up that show how to do that. I do not recommend doing that. You know, a lot of people used to drill it and then they'd put black felt in the back. When you do that, it's not sealed anymore, and technically they're not sealed unless you use plugs, but if you cover the bottoms like normal, it's attached to the cloth body. Moisture can in theory get into the head normal from the air, but I have seen a lot of people over the years have issues with felt dye bleeding, and you get this horrendous dark purple that covers the entire face. Or more moisture gets into the nose than than would normally pass through the cloth body, and they have developed mold on the face. So I really don't recommend opening the nose. I recommend building up that shading just like we do with creases, very gradually, so it doesn't look like a big black blob. But so that, if you look, it just looks like a natural shaded opening. I'm going to do a layer of this purple all over the lips. This will technically be our first lip layer here. And I just want to blend that a little bit. We are going to do creases with this. Blend all these creases, and I just want to kind of hit the ends with my cosmetic wedge so that they don't look stark like they are painted on. I want them to fade out kind of in the same way that the veins do. on the ears, we're going to do the crease in the ear, this inner portion, and this whole inside here. And we might as well do this back crease as well. And we can just kind of pounce that excess with the wedge. We want to do this crease where the ear is actually attached to the head to give that a little bit of shadow and depth like it would naturally be. And just kind of pounce the excess from around there, and we'll do a little bit on that. There's a real small crease on the ear there. And the same exact thing on this ear, the outside crease actually inside all the way down to the canal. And then also same thing, the shadow where the ear actually attaches. And we'll just pounce that excess around it. These ears are so tight to the head. It's really hard to get in there without dragging some paint out. All right, let's do a little bit more on the philtrum. This philtrum is not sculpted deeply at all. I mean, it's not sculpted. This kit is a 3D scan, but this philtrum is almost totally flat. So I really want to give the illusion of a real philtrum there. And now we'll go on to limbs. So for creases, I want to do a lot of these creases. Of course, these ones where the fingers are fused together. I'm gonna do a depth layer with these ones. So I am doing these creases, and I'm not as worried about blotting these off because I'm gonna come back with a pattern. I want to do a first little layer on the nails. So I want to take my purple and go all the way around the nail bed. And then we'll do our creases inside on this nail. And just kind of draw this extra paint around. And I want to do these little creases here. I usually try to do these ones, and this is a style choice. My painting style focuses on hyperrealism. So I spend a lot of time looking at real babies and photos of real babies. I used to be a nurse. I worked in labor and delivery. I also worked in pediatrics. So I've seen a ton of babies in real life, like all different shapes and sizes and colors. And that is going to be like the biggest thing that will help you improve your realism is just knowing what things are supposed to look like. There's a lot of things that we do in reborning. I'm going to do these nails up here and these other finger creases. There's a lot of things that we do in reborning that are exaggerated, where they don't look that way on a real baby, but people expect them for realism, like doing moons and tips on nails that newborns don't usually have. But we do those because then they're done and people are like, oh my goodness, they even have, their nails look so real. But for other things like creases, I use this example a lot. Like I really want the coloring of creases and things like that to look as natural and realistic as possible. I don't want like dark, bloody slash marks for creases. And the way that you achieve that is one, watching what colors you're using and knowing when to stop, but also by really doing everything very slowly and building your color up. And we'll do these little creases there on the elbow here. And I'm not going to blot that off because these are little divots also for a little shadow, so we'll leave those. This one requires a lot more creasing because it is a closed hand. And it's really hard to get in these areas. You can kind of bend them around if you need to. I do want to there's a crease back here that looks like a finger. It is not a finger because the finger is way over here, but I definitely want to do that crease so you can tell it's actually not a finger. And we'll do the nails on these hands as well. And just blending these creases. And I want to make sure they come all the way back here. And I'm pretty much going to do all of these and just pounce them in. And just this little crease and divot on that side of the elbow there. It's easy to forget how many creases these Bountiful Baby kits have. I never paint Bountiful Baby kits anymore unless I have a custom order for one. Just because they generally don't fetch normal, normal price, even though it's pretty awful because the price of a baby should be based on the quality of the work, not necessarily the sculpt. But they are harder sells. Most people that are buying babies prefer sculpted reborns. They want to support sculptors and they prefer to have like a more expensive sculpt, one that isn't, an open edition that is so readily available that everybody has. So I just don't paint them very often. That is like my biggest fear, painting a baby and not being able to sell it. I'm very lucky that doesn't happen, but it would be pretty awful. So I try to stick with sculpts that I know are desirable to really set myself up for success in all the ways possible. But I swear, every time I do one of these, I think, oh my goodness, no wonder I don't paint these anymore. They are so hard with all their creases. Like, creases are difficult anyways to get to look good and realistic, and then you know, take the normal amount of creases and times them by 1,000, and it's almost a guarantee that some of your creases you will not be happy with on one of these kits just because there are so many. But I do love a lot of Reborn faces. And like I said before, I do think that they're great to start with because, you know, they're open edition, so you're not going to ruin a kit that you can't buy a new one of. They are some of the most affordable, so you can buy multiples and while you're learning and not worry about losing too much money. Not that anything about reborning is really inexpensive, but compared to other places. Okay, this looks good. And just like on the other foot, I'm doing a lot of these. And these, you can probably see what I'm doing. Okay, on these feet, there's like 30 little creases right here. I'm kind of just taking my brush, sorry about that, and going over like the whole general area, and I'm just pouncing over it. It's going to settle that paint into those creases. It would be really unrealistic to do every single one of these really tiny shallow creases individually, but I do want to just get a little bit of color into them. The bigger ones, though, the deeper ones, I definitely do individually. Just have a little black speck on my brush that I wiped off. And I can't remember if I said this, but this purple should be about right now almost the same color as our vein mix was. Sorry, I told you guys I was going to really focus on transparency and everything, and then I think I forgot that. I promise I will do better for our future layers. All right, just kind of cleaning up a little bit of excess there. Oh, I love this foot. It has like almost nothing, but, and you probably can't see it, but I can see that great little vein on it. It looks really good, that vein. It's my favorite vein on this whole baby so far. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a depth layer now. I'm going to use this little sponge. So the very first thing that I want to do is I want to show you guys, I guess, the difference really quickly. I'm just going to paint a little bit as it is on my sponge. And can you guys see that color? That would be too dark. Let me see if I can turn this down a little bit so you guys can see it better. That would look absolutely crazy on this baby. So what I want to do is I want to lighten this up. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just use my regular odorless thinner. And you can add a very small amount at a time. And you can either kind of check it on the top by doing this. I can see that that color is good now. Or you can just put a little bit on your sponge and go ahead and test it on the top. I'll show you what this looks like in a palette. I mean, in a little cup. This will look like this. It's a little bit darker than some of our others, but it is still very, very transparent. So I'm going to go ahead, just like we have been doing on, or have on our other layer that we did. I'm just painting a super thin layer on here. I'm not saturating, I'm not double loading. I'm just using a decent regular size brush that's about this, a little bit smaller than my thumb, and just doing a single layer on there. And I'm going to go ahead and just stamp this all over, except for the part of the head that I'm going to have hair on. I want to make sure that I get the back of the neck there. You don't want like the back of the neck to have no definition or anything. I did put it over the nose. I want a little bit of color, but I don't want that pattern on the nose. So I'm just going to pounce it gently with my large loose brush here. And I'm actually going to take some of this that spilled out, and I'm just going to once again do those. It wasn't quite dark enough. You don't have to do that. It was just a personal preference thing. All right, so that is the second layer on the head. And we're going to do the same thing here on the arms. We want to make sure that we get the fingers. We want depth on the fingers. And we're actually going to do some washes on this baby, which those of you who have seen my regular series know that I do not do washes on my normal babies. However, this being like a beginner kind of budget style baby, washes are going to be required, or it would not be a budget baby because it would take me the exact same amount of time and it would have all of the same detail as my high-end babies. So and again, when you're doing this, you are just really gently stamping, like, you know, it's pretty much almost no pressure, a little pressure, but almost none. You're really just barely pressing down to get that pattern on there. And if you know, if you're still struggling with the consistency level or the transparency level of the paint, which I would expect you to be, but if you're struggling with this one, If you're looking at this after you're stamping it and you're seeing any color really, it's too dark. If you can see the pattern, but it's just because it's wet, that is perfect. If you don't start seeing any sort of color or anything starting to come through after your 10th layer, at that point you can start darkening a little bit. I'll talk about that when we get to that point. But you definitely don't want to do it before you're expecting to see any results. And the purpose of these depth layers, I don't know if I've really explained this yet. Well, the main purpose is that they create depth. After we have a whole bunch of these layers together, all these little colors poke through these little tiny holes, and I always have such a hard time explaining depth, but you get something that looks, I guess, more like a watercolor than an oil painting, like where you can see all these little colors coming together. It's not like this thick, solid, single color. It has a lot more dimension and depth. So that is what these are for. But the side effect of these layers is you get enough of them combined, and that's what creates your skin tone also. Which it's a nice side effect. In my normal high-end videos, this is how I build up all of my skin tone, pretty much, is all through those layers. Like I said, this one will be a little bit different, but I really want you guys to understand like the purpose and how these work, so that when you do move over to the more advanced videos, you have an understanding of what I'm talking about and why we're doing the things that we're doing. If you have issues, like say you're dealing with the leg that's bent like this, you can just bend open that leg a little bit more. You don't want to ever like tear or force the vinyl into a position it won't go into, but you know, it is totally fine to maneuver it around as it's able to kind of naturally flex to help you get everywhere you need to get. All right, so this layer is done. I'm going to be baking this layer now for 9 minutes at 265 degrees. Every single time I do a layer that covers most of the vinyl, I'm gonna bake. Technically, you can sometimes do a few layers before you bake. I do not do that. The reason that I don't do it is because heat set paint does not cure until you bake it. So even though it will look air dry to the touch, you can actually still kind of smear it off and wipe it. So if it's air dry appearing, but if anything touches it, it wipes. If you add more layers onto it, like say we did a yellow layer over this purple, instead of having a purple layer and then a yellow layer that has some purple poking through, we would just have a brown layer. It will look muddy and dirty. It can streak and it'll just go together. So it defeats the purpose of doing these individual layers. If I was doing, like when I was doing veining, I'll do veins and then a depth layer and then bake. Like if I'm doing one small thing like a lip layer, I'm not just going to bake the lip layer. I'm going to do another layer that actually covers everything before I bake, but it's really important to bake in between every single full layer. All right, you guys, I'm going to bake this baby. That is going to be the end of video number 1 because I feel like it is very, very long already. And I will see you guys in number 2.